Good morning, everyone. I thought I'd do an extra worship this week as we're welcoming back some more of you to school this morning for the first time for a long time. It's been really lovely this week to welcome back some of the children in nursery, reception, year 1 and year 6. I'm looking forward to catching up with more and more of you as the weeks go by. We've already had our challenge for this week in Monday's worship. It's all about caring for and loving everyone. If you've not yet sent me your Who Is My Neighbour poster, please send them by Friday morning so that I can add them into Monday's worship. Right, for today's worship though, I'm going to do something a little bit different. Instead of a Bible story linked to one of our values, I'm going to tell you another story. It's from one of my favourite books. I'll show you that in just a moment. Before we get into our story, I just want you to think for a moment of a time when you've been really unfairly treated. Maybe someone thought you were being unkind when you weren't. Or perhaps someone thought you were doing something wrong when you weren't. Or maybe you did do something wrong or you said something hurtful, but it was a mistake and you didn't mean it at all in the way that it came out, and everyone thought that you meant it. I wonder, have you ever felt like that? I know I have. It's not a great feeling, is it? Think back for a minute about how it made you feel at the time. It can just be so frustrating, can't it? Everything can seem so unfair. Of course, it happens to all of us sometimes. It can be really upsetting though, just with the injustice of it all. Well, I'm going to read you a story this morning from this book. It's a bit battered, as you can see. That's because I've used it lots and lots. It really is one of my favourite books for sharing with children. It's called There's a Wolf in My Pudding, and it's full of well-known stories, but each story's got a bit of a twist in there, so not quite the version you might be used to. Now, the one I'm going to read to you today is based on the story of Little Red Riding Hood, which I'm sure you will know. But this time, we're going to hear it from the wolf's point of view. So, here we go. Little Red Riding Hood, the wolf's story. Okay, so I got killed in the end, and you all said yippee. I'm not complaining about that. I wasn't as clever as I thought I was. So I'll take my defeat like a wolf. But now that I'm a was-wolf, that is a dead wolf, and I'm up here in Valhalla, paradise for wolves, I'll rest a lot easier if the record is set straight. The official accounts of what happened that day are all lies. And I hate lies, especially lies about me. So, here's the story of what really happened. The first lie that annoys me is all this big, bad wolf business. Big. Well, I might have been average size once, but by the time I was killed, I was more ribs than muscles. I hadn't had a decent meal in weeks. Skinny, yes. Big, no. And why bad? What was ever bad about me? I reckon I'm one of the nicest wolves I know. So, instead of in the forest there lived a big bad wolf, now read, in the forest there lived a skinny, nice wolf. Next, we come to the question of motive. The history books say I wanted to eat Little Red Riding Hood. I didn't, and I can prove it. But even if I had wanted to eat her, what is so terrible about that? When she had eggs and bacon for breakfast, did anyone complain that big bad Red Riding Hood took the eggs from the chicken, as well as 2 slices off Porky Pig? When she had roast turkey for Christmas, did it bother her what might have happened to Mrs. Turkey and all the little Turks? When she sank her teeth into a juicy rump steak, did she spare a thought for some poor cow walking round the field with half its bottom missing? What's the difference between a little girl eating me and my mates and me eating a little girl? Anyway, As I said, I didn't want to eat her. Here's the proof. You remember she and I had a little chat in the woods. I asked her where she was going, what she had in the basket, and where her sick granny lived. Well, if I was close enough to talk to her, you'll have to agree that I was close enough to eat her. Why didn't I? Some of the accounts suggest it was because there were some woodcutters nearby. Rubbish. If there'd been a single woodcutter nearby, I'd have been off faster than you can say the wonderful wolf went away from the wood. The fact is, I was after Red Riding Hood's basket with all the goodies in it. With my blunt old teeth, I couldn't even bite a chicken, let alone a little girl. It was the basket I wanted. I thought of stealing it from her there and then, but for 3 reasons I didn't. First, I didn't want to upset her. Second, she might have started screaming, and I don't like screams or people who hear screams. And third, she might not have let go, and I was in no condition for a fight. My plan was very simple. I intended to pop along to Granny's cottage, give her a little scare so she'd run away for a few minutes, pretend I was Granny, and relieve Red Riding Hood of the basket. Then she would have gone home thinking she'd done her good deed. Granny would have come back feeling pleased she'd escaped from the wolf, and I'd have got the basket. We'd all have lived happily ever after. Only things didn't quite work out that way. First of all, in spite of what the official accounts might say, Granny wasn't there. I pushed open the door, all set to say boo and get out of the way as she rushed out. But there was nobody to say boo to. Actually, I was rather glad, because some grannies don't scare easily. I've seen grannies that scared me a good deal more than I scared them. Anyway, the room was empty, so I reckoned it was my lucky day. I crawled into bed, pulling the covers over me. In a few minutes, little Red Riding Hood came along. And again, the history books have got it all wrong. Unless she was as short-sighted as a one-eyed rhinoceros, do you honestly think she would have taken me for her grandmother? All those lies about what big teeth you have, and so on. I'll tell you exactly what we said to each other. When she knocked at the door, I stayed under the covers and called out, "Who is it?" That was rather clever of me. I knew who it was, but Granny wouldn't have, would she? "It's me, Grandma," said Red Riding Hood. "Who's me?" I asked. "You's you," she replied. "Well, who's you?" I asked. "Little Red Riding Hood," she said. "I've brought you a basket full of lovely food." "Oh, surprise, surprise," I said. "Come in, my dear, come in." And in she came. Naturally, I stayed under the covers. "How are you, Grandma?" she asked. "I'm not well at all, dear," I said. "I've caught a catching illness, and as I don't want you to catch it too, I'll stay under the covers till you've gone. Just leave the basket there, dear, and run along home. Run quickly, because I've heard there's a big bad wolf in the forest." It was brilliant. I felt like jumping out of bed and giving myself a round of applause. "Yes, Grandma," said Red Riding Hood, and she put down the basket, turned round to leave, and just my luck. Who should walk into the room at that moment but Granny herself? I knew I was in trouble as soon as I heard the footsteps. I'd have made a run for it if I hadn't been paralysed with terror. "Hello, Red Riding Hood," said Granny. "Hello, Grandma," said Red Riding Hood. "Hello, Trouble," said I to myself. "Grandma," said Red Riding Hood, "if you're here, who could that be in your bed?" I wished I could just curl up and disappear down the side of the mattress. "Whoever you are," said Granny, "I've got you covered. Come out with your hands up." I poked my nose out from under the blanket. "Look," I said, "it's all been a terrible mistake." "He's the big bad wolf," said Red Riding Hood. No, I'm just a skinny nice wolf." Bang, bang, bang. Oh, the injustice. All I wanted was something to eat. But before I even had a chance to impress them with my charm and good intentions, Granny had put 3 bullets right where I should have had the fruit cake and chocolate biscuits. I collapsed like a chopped tree. "Good shooting, Grandma," said Red Riding Hood. Though what was good about it, I shall never know. "Quick, fetch the vet," I gasped. But the last thing those two had in mind was to help poor dying Wolfie. "We ought to get the newspapers here," said Granny. "This could be quite a story." "Oh yes," said Red Riding Hood. "They might publish our pictures and we'd be famous." And while I lay there, half in and half out of the world, they calmly discussed the tale they would tell the reporters. Granny was worried she might get into trouble because she didn't have a licence for her gun. I wish she'd thought of that earlier. Red Riding Hood also wondered why Granny hadn't been in her bed, because she was supposed to be sick. Turned out that Granny had been on the lavatory. But she certainly wasn't going to tell that to the reporters. "And what," said Granny, "are they going to think when they find the wolf in my bed? After all, I've got my reputation to think of." "Blow your reputation," I groaned. "What about me? I've been shot." "You keep out of this, Wilfie," said Granny. "You've caused enough trouble as it is." I'd caused trouble. Was it my fault she'd been on the lavatory? And who fired the gun? And who didn't have a licence? But it was no use arguing. They'd made up their minds that I was the villain and they were the heroes. "Perhaps," said Little Red Riding Hood, "we can pretend someone else shot him. A hunter or a woodcutter." "But that wouldn't explain how he got into my bed," said Granny. "I know what," cried Red Riding Hood. "We could say you were in bed and Wolfie came in and ate you." "You must be joking," I moaned. "With my teeth I couldn't eat a chicken, let alone a tough old bird like Granny." "Keep quiet, Wolfie," said Granny. "No, the problem there, my dear, is that if he'd eaten me, I'd be dead, and I'm not." "Well," said Red Riding Hood, "we could say he ate you whole, and then the woodcutter cut him open, and you came out alive." "Now that's an idea," said Granny. Oh yeah," I gasped. "A newborn, 15 stone, 60-year-old baby? Who's going to believe that?" "Then," continued the Little Red Liar, "we'll say he disguised himself as you. I came in, and the woodcutter rescued me in the nick of time." "Oh well," I groaned. "Why don't I eat a whole Red Riding Hood for dessert? Make a proper meal of it." "Why not?" asked Granny. "You're both crazy," I panted. "Nobody in this whole wide world can be stupid enough to swallow a story like that." Those were my last words. With one more bullet from Granny, I huffed my last puff. But I died happy in the knowledge that nobody in the whole wide world could be stupid enough to swallow a story like that. Ugh, how wrong can a wolf be? Poor old Wolfie. Wasn't that unfair? Sometimes people do get us wrong, don't they? They make a mistake, or don't understand us, or don't realise what we're trying to say or do. And it can be so frustrating. Perhaps you've got into trouble for something at home or at school that just wasn't your fault. These things happen, don't they? Of course, though, sometimes we get other people wrong too. We can be too quick to listen to what others say about someone instead of making our own opinion. I'm sure you'll be able to think of a time at school when someone's told you something that someone else has done, and before you know it, half the class have heard about it. And probably the story's been twisted and changed as it's been told by so many different people, each putting their little bit in. Or maybe we base what we think on what someone looks like instead of taking the time to get to know them. Or on a first impression. I guess if you took one look at Wolfie's big sharp teeth, you could easily assume he really was a big bad wolf instead of a nice wolf. So it's important to remember, isn't it? Let's make sure we take the time to give people a chance, to get to know them, to look for the good. Sometimes we just need to give people a chance to explain, and we can make everything better. Or sometimes if someone misunderstands us, we just need to take the time to calmly explain what's happened. Usually, not always, but usually, this will mean that misunderstandings can be cleared up and sorted out. Right, now if you want to, I'm going to invite you to join me in a prayer. This prayer comes from the empathy section of our prayer book. It's been written by Harry in Year 3. Shall we pray? Dear God, please teach us to be kind and to show empathy and understanding in a world where we are all different, not less. Amen. What a super prayer. It's so important that we take time to listen to and to understand each other. Right, that's it from me today. Take care. God bless. See you soon.